Okay, let's get started. And so we're at the top of the hour, so please take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. This is John Hose with ServiceNow, and I want to welcome everyone to our webinar today, where we're going to be discussing project to product and how ServiceNow's Agile capabilities can enable your Agile transformation. Joining me is Andrew Hoagland, our ITBM Advisory Solution Consultant. Andrew is a subject matter expert across all of our ITBM applications, and he's going to be the lead speaker today and will also be leading our demo. A quick note on Safe Harbor. Some of the statements and comments we share today may be forward-looking, and they are potentially open to change. So we do just want to put that awareness out there. And before we start and I hand things over to Andrew, we do want to start with a quick poll for the audience. And we'd basically be interested in knowing, what is your ServiceNow experience? So if you could please take a moment to answer that question, we'll then share the results. Okay, and we have some results coming in. I'll just wait another moment for folks to answer. So please submit your answers if you haven't already. Okay, and we have about 50% participation right now. So the results that we've seen are that a number of you are using ServiceNow already and are using the ITBM application. For many of you, may not have experience with ITBM or have only used ideation, but have used many of the other components within the business management suite, including some of the Agile Scrum capabilities. So thank you for your responses to that. We have another poll question we'll be asking a little later on. And for now, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew. Andrew, you may need to unmute.
Oops.
I unmuted you.
Okay, thank you. Let's try that again. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. Just quickly to go over our agenda, we're going to be talking initially here about strategic demand versus our ongoing demand, right? Keeping the lights on, going from project to product, and then we'll talk about some of our methodologies out there, Waterfall versus Agile. And then we'll talk about how we can help enable your enterprise agility. And then we'll talk a little bit about the 3 modes of Agile before we get into our demo. Now, every company has a top-down strategy. Typically, it's established by our executives to align the company's investments to portfolios, programs, really with the hopes of delivering the most value to customers. Strategic portfolios really help to deliver on the vision of the entire business and to support the vision. Initiatives are funded and teams are allocated accordingly. However, as we can see on this vertical axis, not all work is strategic in nature. Organizations must also focus on the operational work and tactical stuff that needs to get done. And a lot of this all comes in from ongoing demand that happens in everyday business every single day. Whether it's strategic work or operational work, the work being planned, prioritized, and delivered is managed across many work methods, ranging from our traditional, which we typically something like Waterfall, to Agile, as seen on this horizontal axis. So at the, let's get this going here. At the top here, we have a number of ways to invest in those strategic initiatives, right? We have new products, positioning against our competitors, and introducing new technologies through digital transformation. We always want to create great employee and customer experiences, and we need analytics to help drive these strategic initiatives. We also have at the bottom here, we see different types of operational activities we have to do to keep the lights on. Enhancements requests, problems, changes, just maintaining the current state, managing our CMDB services, and rationalizing our business applications and our business services. So at this point, I'd like to take our second poll. Maybe John, if you could kick that off for us.
Yep, of course. One moment. Okay, so I've just launched a poll. So again, if everyone who's attending could participate, that would be great. And we're just interested in what methodologies are you currently using today within your organization? And then the second question is, what methodologies is your organization using? So one, what are you personally using? And then two, what is your organization using? So again, we'll wait just a minute for folks to answer those questions. And I do see a lot of answers rolling in right now. Thank you. But if everyone could just take a moment to answer, that would be appreciated. Okay. And we have about 50% participation. I'll wait just another moment. If maybe a couple more folks can chime in, that would be appreciated. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. And what we see is that we do have a large number that are still primarily working in Waterfall. We do have some Scrum and Kanban. Doesn't look like anyone has personally used SAFe yet. And then in terms of organizations, again, still primarily Waterfall, although we're seeing more Scrum and Kanban there, and even a little bit of scaled Agile framework. So I think that's very interesting in terms of the way that we're seeing work evolve in organizations, and some of the information that Andrew will continue to share with you now. Andrew?
Thanks, John. Let me just clear my screen here. And okay, so from here we can show the connections from the strategic direction at the top and the operational that we have at the bottom. And we have multiple solutions at the top for all that strategic planning, and multiple solutions at the bottom for all that operational work. And we're seeing our customers using these multiple solutions at the top and the bottom. And with the tension of running the business, that strategic demand versus that ongoing demand of changing the business, the tool sprawl really goes ahead and further exasperates the tension between the two different parts of the organization. And the analysts tell us this as well, along with the companies. On average, we're spending less than a third of our spend on transforming the business, and that comes to us from Gartner. And only 30% of our time is spent developing differentiating features, and this is what McKinsey tells us. And finally, the PMI Institute tells us we're wasting about $1 million every 20 seconds, and 10% of our spend is wasted due to poor project performance. The end result here is that IT initiatives are often disconnected from the business strategy. And the role here of planning is changing our enterprise. The traditional organization that we see here is designed primarily for stability. It's static, it's siloed, it has a structural hierarchy. Goals and decisions, they flow down that hierarchy with the most powerful governance bodies up at the top. and it operates through that linear planning control that we know in order to capture value for stakeholders and others. And the skeletal structure is strong, but often rigid and slow moving. In contrast, an agile organization designed for both stability and dynamics is a network of teams within a people-centric culture. It operates in rapid, fast learning and fast decision cycles which are enabled by technology. And it's guided by a powerful common purpose to co-create value for all the stakeholders. Really, such an agile operating model has the ability to quickly and efficiently reconfigure strategy, structure, process, people, and technologies towards value creating and value protecting opportunities. So an agile organization thus adds velocity and adaptability to stability and creating a critical source of competitive advantage in really volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous conditions. And our approach here at ServiceNow is to leverage a platform to centralize demand for both those strategic initiatives like new products, new product development, digital transformation, or customer experiences, as well as demand for that operational work like incidents, problems, or maintenance. With all IT, business and application portfolio, programs, project all in one location, we can help decrease the cost from that operational work to allow you to grow those strategic initiatives, since IT now has a picture of both operational and strategic demand. In one platform, teams can collaborate, prioritize, plan, and execute traditional projects, Agile or Scrum methods, or in the case of some customers, a hybrid model. They can do it all in one area. Regardless really of the work method, or if your work is strategic or operational, data helps you understand if you're meeting your outcomes and delivering value to the business. So we help solve for that disconnect between the strategic work and the operational work by centralizing portfolios, plans, work, all in one location to allow IT to deliver value aligned to the business objectives. All right, so let's take a quick look back here. Let's talk about our waterfall methodology. Waterfall is a linear approach to software development, right? It's a sequential linear process of project management, and it has some main pros and cons here. Traditionally, we'll have agreement on the full scope, and it'll be agreed by the teams and customers up front. It's fairly easy to plan, design, and budget. The problems or the cons here is that it's really a long time to value. Customers rarely get what they want, and often there's little communication between the groups and the stages that we see here. System integration often is extremely challenging here as well. That brings us to Agile, right? Let's iterate. And it's a team-based methodology here. Agile is an incremental methodology initially planned for software development. All the stages are conducted in short time boxes of 2 to 4 weeks by small self-organized teams of about 6 to 9 people. There's some key pros here, right? The scope can pivot based on the customer needs and feedback. The time to value can be extremely fast. And the customer is part of that team, so there's a high degree of ownership. Cons here is that it can often be, or traditionally it's been hard for established companies to adopt it, and it takes time for companies to establish that cadence, and it requires a cultural shift, which is often difficult for organizations. Okay, so Agile accelerates value delivery, and we can see our waterfall project here. We move through our different stage gates until we have a product. Well, with Agile, we have these, we reiterate, right? We have every 2 to 4 weeks, we get feedback through these reiterative cycles. It gives us better alignment with our teams and end users and our customers, as mentioned in the previous slide, to get a minimal viable product quickly. Okay, let's compare and contrast traditional delivery and governance models to really see how we can become an agile enterprise. Over here on the left, we'll see some traditional linear things that we're familiar with. And then portfolio will come in and demand comes in, and we go in and we prioritize and we plan and we build and we move through the different gates. Meanwhile, we're constantly looking at this in terms of scope, people, and cost. And in the end, we end up with a product, and the loop continues. But in all this, we can notice here that we have pockets of Agile coming up. And this could be the first step where we see that team-based approach in your organization. We see specific teams starting to use Agile in a way that works for them. Let's talk about enterprise agility and how we can enable that. And what we're talking about here are all the other activities that we can be doing now, we can be doing on the ServiceNow platform. It would be great if all of our ideas came in at the same time with the same cadence, all on the exact same schedule, but that's not really what happens. It happens in waves, right? And everybody within ServiceNow has the ability to participate in the innovation, to bring those things that we want to do, the various different ideas. And we have a way of doing that within ServiceNow all in one place. Once we have our ideas and our demands, we can then align all of them to our strategies, our goals with the corporate direction. We can ensure that the funding is in place. And once we have that, we can get into planning and tracking the projects and get into our build and test. With DevOps, we can leverage automated change requests with fast feedback cycles to move in a much more agile way. And then we move on to our support services, where we can quickly gain insights and make improvements throughout our iterative life cycle. All along this, we have measurable outcomes, and we deliver value, right? And we encompass this with a continuous learning feedback cycles throughout the entire value stream. And it really gives us a customer-obsessed delivery model. Okay, let's talk about our 3 modes of Agile. And this is just a precursor to really what we're going to see in our demo today. The first mode of Agile we have here is Scrum. This is our product-based approach, and Scrum works very well on its own for that individual team out there. They get to operate the way they like to. But each team is going to operate a little bit differently, and Scrum has some limitations built into it by design. But Scrum has also been very successful at the team level. Some of those limitations would be an iteration knows its start date, it knows its end date, but it has no concept of time or money. As we need to scale, you need to go in a couple of different directions. And the first direction would be to bring Scrum into more the traditional waterfall project, which would be hybrid. So in the picture here along the top, I can see stage phases coming from my waterfall project, but below you can see I've embedded Scrum right inside the waterfall project. So this really gives us the best of both worlds. Teams can operate in the way that they're used to operating. They don't need to compromise. The folks are used to, the folks that are used to the more traditional project management methodologies, they can operate the way they like to with things like CapEx, OpEx, time management, controls, status, that sort of thing. So this would be more in terms of taking Scrum and finding ways to scale it. That's the hybrid approach. And then there's the Agile answer to scaling the enterprise. And I saw in the poll questions that we do have an organization out there using Scaled Agile Framework. So this is the Agile answer, right? Scaled Agile Framework, which is essentially within a Scaled Agile Framework, we have at the bottom level, I'll have that same team-based approach, but now our stories are being composed of features, and our features are being composed of epics, and we can see all those 3 levels here. So that brings us to the demo. So if you just give me a moment here. bring. All right, so here we are in the ServiceNow user interface. And before we get into Scrum and Sprint, I just want to highlight a few things here. And I want to highlight that we can turn any process in ServiceNow into a visual task board. Anytime we're in a list view like we are here, we can do some pretty powerful things. And I'll show you a couple of those. But I want to call out, we're in incidents here, okay? And if I perhaps wanted to see all the incidents that for the service desk, I can go ahead and I can do that. And I can show all these incidents here specific to the service desk. And I did that with only 2 clicks. I'll just point you up here that we have these breadcrumbs forming here by our automated query builder. We can drill deeper into this if we choose. I can drag this over here and I can add it as a shortcut. But just to take this a bit farther, I can click on the hamburger up here and I can take this to a visual task board. Now we're presented with a visual task board, that Kanban style board, but I just want to make sure that a lot of times customers see this view and they think that we're working in Agile and we're executing in Agile, but we're not. We're still in incidents here. So it's a pretty powerful way of interacting with our data. But now we can do certain things. I can filter on who's working on what. I can filter by some keywords if I choose. Some other things, I can move my instance through their different stages. Something to note here is that if I move this request for a new service over to resolved and I haven't entered in the required information, it's going to honor that business logic in the back end and it's going to refuse to move it until it's filled in. I can go into an incident here and I can see that it's the same incident process as it was before. Just some other platform features I'd like to point out. I can go here and I can customize the view by editing my filter here if I want to change how things look. I'm presented with some basic information. I can also favorite this. I can add it to favorites if I choose. I can also come up here and I can assign participants to this board as I see fit. I can also turn my labels on and off here, and we can see the labels over here. And I can assign different labels to different incidents on this board. So that's just a quick preview of the visual task board in general. From here, I'm going to switch over my users to a product owner. Okay. And here we are, we're on our Agile board in our backlog. But before we get into sprint, tracking, planning, and our backlog, I just want to highlight that the Agile solution in ServiceNow is a product-based solution. And there's a product taxonomy behind each of these stories. So when I drill into stories here, we can see them here. And I can take a deeper look into products. As I drill into my product here, I can see that my release is attached to that product. I can get into my themes, my epics, my stories. A pretty important thing here is getting into my who's assigned to it. So I can drill into my CRM engineering team, and I can see those team members here. I also have the ability to establish the velocity up here, and that's what we're expecting from this team on how many points do we expect them to be able to accomplish on an iteration by iteration basis. And we'll see this when we get into sprint planning and execution. You'll see where that capacity is coming from. So let's just jump over to our Agile board. We're in our backlog right now. First thing I'll call out here is that this board here, this form, is being driven by this drop down, and it changes as I move through the different personal backlogs. But right now we're looking at all stories, and we can see these KPI cards, and these are filterable. So if I want to see no story points, no acceptance criteria, I can do that. I can also filter by my epics over here on the left. We're going to keep this as all records for now. In terms of creating a story, we can just come up here and we can see all those things that we would expect associated with story, whether it's it's a theme. We can add in our epics if we choose. We can add in our points. We can add in our description. If we have any acceptance criteria, we can add that in. And I can add that in, and we can see that this has been added here into my backlog that could then become a story. I have the ability to manipulate the data here. I can move this up and down in its ranking. I can also select multiple fields to update them. So it becomes pretty powerful. So I could, if I had a group of items here that I needed to move down to the bottom, I could do so. I can also update multiple records at one time through this menu here. And it's at this point, I'd like to just talk a little bit more about that personal backlog. So I'm just going to navigate over here to a personal backlog, our CRM portal. Now I'm just seeing all those stories in the backlog that's specific to the CRM backlog. I can go into and edit this, and we can see our filter conditions that bring up that personal backlog. So we can make changes to this if we see fit. And then I just want to draw attention over here to our triage board. We don't have anything associated with this right now, but if I go back to all stories, it's going to bring up some items. So we'll drill into the triage board here. And here I can see any non-story record in ServiceNow and bring it into our Agile backlog. And the point here being is that we've seen a lot of customers over the years. An incident comes in that it can get resolved immediately, or it can be assigned as, like we have here, a defect or a problem. And it may go over to a third-party Agile solution where it's worked. At some point after it's been, resolved or changed, it's got to come back into ServiceNow, and you have to let us know that's been addressed. Well, here we can address and we can circumvent that whole process. We can do it all directly here in ServiceNow in what we call our unified backlog. So say if I wanted to go into our defects, all I have to do is simply click it and bring it into our backlog. And we can see that's been added here. Okay, so from here, let's move over to our sprint planning. And I'll just kind of reiterate that this screen is being driven by the backlog here. When I move over into our sprint planning, it's changed to the team level. In here, I can see all the iterations and sprints. We can create a new sprint. And when I click create sprint, I get this little pop-up. And I can see that there's a naming convention here in place. So our last sprint was number 8, so it continues on with number 9. I can see that my start and end dates are they have the same duration between them, so it keeps that same cadence. And we also have our group capacity points as set by default. Speaking about capacity points, we can see them here. Well, let's just point out, we can see our sprints here with all of our stories attached. We can expand, we can open up. But getting back into our points here, we can see, for example, this sprint number 6 we're over capacity, right? We're at 106. What I have the ability to do is interact with the form, and I can drag and drop items, and we'll recalculate that. And we can see that the pressure has been relieved off of this particular sprint as we move it into the new one. And something that we just need to really make note of here is that all the same features that we saw in the backlog persist here. So the ability to update multiple records, the ability, as you saw, to drag and drop. We can do that with multiple records here as well. And it's here that we're focused on the team that we're working with and their planning. But from here, let's head over to our next section, sprint tracking. And once again, we'll see that Kanban style board that we can interact with in sprint execution. So just like we saw in the list of incidents, here I can use this to understand who's working on what. I can move these stories through the process. Again, it's going to honor that business logic in the back end. I can filter on people. All those great things that I showed you when we first got into a visual task board. Okay, so we are in team. We should now, from here, let's move over to Scrum at the program level. And here we are in the program view. And I have now an aggregated way to see how the teams are working together. Along the left here, I can see all the teams that are part of this Scrum, right? And from here, I can also see the sprints and the stories and all the interdependencies here that work between all of them. I can grab this, I can move this between different sprints and teams, and you'll notice it'll carry over those dependencies, and it'll alert me if there's an issue. All the meantime, you'll also notice that we have our capacity numbers, so it'll recalculate that capacity. And this really shows the team's ability to actually execute on these stories. All right, so we've just taken a look at mode 1 of Agile, as we mentioned in the PowerPoint, right? We saw Scrum, we saw the ability to aggregate this at the program level. Let's head over to our hybrid approach. So, wait a second here. Oops. Make sure I'm logged in. Okay. All right. So here we are. I am now logged in as Paul Martin, the project manager. And I am here in his workspace, and immediately you're presented with what I feel is a great board in ServiceNow. So we have all these cards, and these are configurable so that if people want to express different metadata, those options are out there for them if they want to configure them differently. But you can immediately look on this page and see which projects are maybe at risk or on track. We can see the status, percent complete, all these great things. But let's jump into the project. And the way we navigate this project are these tabs up at the top, okay? First we see analytics, which is this dashboard that we see below. Details are going to be that form view with all the metadata driving the process really forward. Planning will be my work breakdown structure, and resources is where I have that formal resource management. So not normally something that you'd want to use in a Scrum-based solution. So this is a way that we can use Scrum with Waterfall together. And then financials, again, Scrum really doesn't really have a way to deal with things like CapEx and OpEx, but we may have a Waterfall project that needs to track this. And then finally, we have our status report, which is fairly traditional in nature. And this is the project status that key stakeholders will see no matter what their context is. And we can see that we have a header here, and we have our summary. We can see our plan versus actual, our resources, our status, all the things that we need to report on a project. I'll head back over here to analytics because it's a great looking dashboard. And we have all the things that I need to assess a project and to understand what's going on. We have these KPIs up at the top that initially tell us the status. We know that we're in trouble here. We can see that we've missed some tasks and milestones. So a lot of quick information here. And this is one of our out-of-the-box dashboards with project management analytics, but you'll see here, really what we're doing is we're leveraging platform features that we already have. We'll head over to our details, and it's going to give us that form view. And I can see, key thing here is I can see, jumped over, I can see portfolios and programs associated to this, right? Because this is a hybrid project and we have a concept of product. And further below, we're going to see more traditional processes that we'd expect from a project like this, like issues and risk and project change requests. And you'll notice we have a second change request here. And this is our traditional ITIL change request. And when I click on this, it becomes our normal way of submitting one of those ITIL, ITSM change requests. And this really, it's just a really good example when we look at that and how we can bring in different surface information from other areas of the Now platform. And we can really just remove friction from overall processes. Okay, from here, let's head over to our planning tab. And this is where things start to look quite familiar in the sense of a waterfall project. We're in the planning console here, and we can see I have my tasks that break down into subordinate tasks. We also can see our plans, start dates, who this is assigned to. We'll see our lovely Gantt chart here with our dependencies, and we can click on our dependencies. We have all 4 that we would usually be used to. We have the concept of lag and lead for those who are using Microsoft Project. And then right in the middle here, we can see that we have Scrum or Agile phases embedded right into the project. And this is the one place where Waterfall and Agile really get along. So for the folks up here working in traditional Waterfall, all they know is that there's a start and end date, and they're not really concerned about how the other team is working. So they can, coexist together. I also want to just quickly call out, we have external dependencies, and I have the ability to come up here and show those and turn them off. And there's a few other things I can configure here as well. It's also really worth noting, I can also come up here and I can add Agile phases as I really need to and see fit. So as you move forward on your Agile journey, we're going to have some teams that will adopt Agile in a more structured way, and then you're going to have some that may want to go trial by fire. Let's try Agile this week with no training. So you're looking at a way here that we can isolate these teams. They can both, the project can execute in both Agile and Waterfall, and neither of the team really needs to compromise here. So everybody can move forward in that journey together. Okay, so let's turn it over, and we're going to move over from our planning console over to our project workbench. And really what we have here is that exact same work down break structure before. We have our summary level tasks, and when I click on initiating, I can see the project task start date, the end date, percentage complete, all the things I expect on a waterfall project. But when I click on development, which is Agile, I'm now seeing stories that are part of sprint and that have points. And it's from here that I can start to, really bring together or marry together the visual task board. And I can bring up the visual task board here. And the same thing that we saw in our incidents, and the same thing that we saw in our Scrum execution, I can now see how I can use this visual collaborative experience together, whether it's traditional or agile tasks. And really, this is where it becomes a design decision for you as the customer. Can we have our agile teams only see the execution of the iteration or sprint that they're in? They don't need to be concerned with the formal resource management or formal financial management. At the same time, teams are working in a traditional waterfall method, and they'll likely have a great concern for all these formal items. But the key here is that everybody's more than welcome to use both parts of the methodologies, but we don't need to force them to compromise to use solutions that don't make sense for them. And before I go, I just want to quickly touch on resource and financial management. So when I go to resource management here, it's a formal resource management. So by default, Scrum would not really want to use this. But that may be a big capital project where we need, a formal resource management, and Scrum teams can be embedded into this. So each lines I see here is a different resource plan, and we can have them requested to specific teams. We can build them to roles or individual peoples. The states that I'm looking at here, this is really the resource process itself. It comes in initially and it's planned, and then the resource manager starts to confirm or softbook before she finally allocates, and then we see the actuals come in. We can also use the resource finder up here, and we can use this to find our various different resources, see how they're allocated. We can adjust this as well. We can add in different fields as we see fit. And we can do this all without having to navigate away from the project. Just quickly on financials. You can see here that we have the ability to capture costs in terms of a CapEx, OpEx, and we can break it down to specific cost types as well. We can also take a look at things based on year, quarter, month, things like total plan cost, total budget, actual cost, things that you would typically need for a formal project. So that closes out mode 2, where we saw a waterfall project and how we could embed Scrum into it. The next section is scaled agile framework. And just want to start off here. All right. Before we get into the demo part here, I just want to jump over quickly to the Scaled Agile Framework website. First off, this is a fantastic site to learn about SAFe. Everything's drillable here. If you need to learn what a feature is, or get into an epic or the Agile release train, you can get all that information here. But here we'll just start at Essential SAFe. Well, first of all, here at ServiceNow, we have two types of SAFe. We have Essential and we have Portfolio. So in Essential, we can see here at the very bottom that we have that same team-based solution. You can see that we're working in PIs, or program increments, which is typically these 5 2-week sprints. And you can see that my stories are becoming parts of features, and they're being delivered through this continuous delivery pipeline, which is our Agile release train. So the Agile release train, this is where we become the team of teams. I now have multiple teams working on a feature that decomposes into those stories. When we come over to Portfolio SAFe, you can see that we've added Portfolio along with Essential. So there's portfolio at the top, and then there's our team-based solution at the bottom. And with the entrance of portfolio, we have the concept of epics, which then break down into our features, which then break down into our stories. What this is doing is giving our stakeholders and owners something more meaningful as we start to aggregate to tangible features inside of an epic. And these are things our customers can relate to. There's a lot of difficulty around transparency on what Agile teams are doing, and this is a way that gives us visibility, to those stakeholders at all levels. Okay, let's jump over back to our demo and take a look at scaled Agile framework from the ServiceNow perspective. We're in as a SAFe portfolio manager, and we're on the SAFe board, and we're in stories. I just want to call out here that we're in the Agile release train right now, but we see those three levels that we just talked about: the portfolio, Agile release train, and team. And you'll notice that all the sprints here are lined up. The difference here between Scrum, a Scrum program board, and the SAFe program board is that all of them are lined up. And Scrum lets teams do what they want to do. SAFe ensures that every team has the same cadence. You can see all the teams that are aligned to this Agile release train. And we can see that has the same look and feel as we had on the program board. I can see the interdependencies. I can move items to different teams or different sprints. And we're calculating that, the story points or the capacity. And the other thing I can do is, because we mentioned it on our website, is that we can also look at this from the feature view, and that's the same look and feel. So I'll come back to stories here, and I'll just draw your attention to our stories in my backlog over here. And I can open this up and I can find these stories that are in our backlog, and I can assign them to a team or a particular sprint as I see fit. So this is portfolio at the Agile release train level. This is that team of teams that we're seeing, right? Let's go ahead and look at things from the portfolio level. And let's see here. And so this is the same, I'll just call it quickly here. This is a list of our portfolios, right? And this is the same list that we'll use in project portfolio management. So from a scaled Agile framework perspective, and I'll just jump over actually to our board here quickly. From a scaled Agile perspective, these are all epics moving through our pipeline. And the same functionality exists here that we saw in our previous Kanban boards. We can filter on people, I can drag and drop stuff, move it through the funnel. But I'm going to go ahead and drill into our epic here on our ad platform. And as I mentioned, this is the epic, and we have components of weighted shortest job first score. And that score is going to come up here. It's going to give our WSJF score. And whether I enter into this information down here, the score is provided up here. And then further below, I can see when I come down below here, I can see all the features associated with this particular epic. All right, and so as things move through the funnel here and get to our backlog, we're going to jump back over to our backlog. This is where our epics are presented in our overall backlog. And you'll notice that they're ranked or ordered by our shortest weighted job first, but I can move this across. If I choose that it needs to land somewhere else, I can do that. So I'll just take a moment here and head back over to back over to our Agile release train. So really what we're seeing here, one second, we'll jump into our board view. And what we see here are features are developing and moving closer to that backlog. And again, we can interact with this as we saw before. I can filter off some individuals, and I can get a little bit more specific here, and I can drill into a particular feature. So I can drill into allow hotels to pay for ads, and I can see we also have the the shortest weighted job first here as well at the feature level. And I can see how this is decomposing into our stories. And then once again, as we move into our backlog, I can rank things. I can move them in and out as I see fit. I can also create program increments here. So any program increment created here in this Agile release train, we'll see our plans start and end dates continue, and we'll see those iterations automatically get populated. So we have by default, which is best practice, we have 5 2-week sprints. And then from here, we can pop out of here and we can go back where we started from, which is really what the big room planning is. And this gives us that visualization of exactly what SAFe is. The concept of these teams working together, with synchronized iterations, understanding the dependencies of stories between teams and iterations. And then finally, and I'm not going to go too deep into it, is the team level. Because really, all the functionality here is the same as what we saw, but simply at the team level. We can open these up, we can do our filters, we can see our sprint tracking and our backlog. But really, that concludes the demo portion of our webinar today. And I'll just head back over to our PowerPoint to wrap things up. Okay. And, this really just closes off on how I think IT business management can help enable enterprise agility, right? The ability for us to have all these different workflows, all these different work streams in one place gives us the ability to align it, make sure that we're working on the right initiatives and that we're creating value, because we're all in one place and we have the ability to manage uncertainty and we have adaptive planning. The flexibility to use all these different methodologies and the ability for people to work the way they want to work allows us to bring the work to the people and not make the teams compromise. And the ability to do this, we can do it all on one platform. And that's a real key thing here. With that being said, that wraps things up from my side, and I will leave the resources page up here, and I'll fire things back over to John.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. And here I'd just like to point out, these are some links to some assets on our Agile management solution that you can use online. So please feel free to check those out. And at this point, we'd like to open it up for questions. And we do already have a question that has come in via the chat, which was, if there are, how do we work in both Agile and SAFe together? Can those be used on the platform at the same time? They seem to be rather separated. The answer to that is that you can. They are separated in one way by design, because they really are for two different purposes. Agile is really for team-based work that is not going to be related to a scaled Agile framework effort. And SAFe is really for those larger co-related efforts. So you wouldn't really want to commingle those stories per se, because you'd be mixing up, work related to different initiatives. That said, within Scaled Agile Framework, we do have the same unified backlog features. So some of our clients will just manage their team Agile stories within the SAFe unified backlog, you could manage all of that work using SAFe stories, but again, that would not really be recommended, as those are going to be related to that larger effort and could then lead to some reporting or separation issues. So that it is separate by design, but there are ways to see that work in one place so that a team who might be involved in both SAFe efforts and be doing their own teamwork can see all their work in one place. Are there?
Yeah, and then I posted the answer out there, John. I'll just add a remark. Yeah, there's essentially too, the other thing to think about, essentially the team level of SAFe is Scrum. And as John mentioned, there are two different methodologies. So by default, they don't work together. But as with anything else in ServiceNow, they certainly could be configured to work together. I could see a use case if you had some teams overlapping. That one was just using a team-based Scrum approach that was working with another part of the organization that had SAFe, but by design they are not set up that intentionally.
Okay. Are there any other questions from any of the attendees?
You can post in the Q&A. Okay, I think you can wrap it up, John.
Yep. No.
Go to the resources slide. We could just go to the resources slide real quick and end on that.
Yep. So again, these are the links that you can use to follow up on if you are interested in additional information. And thank you, Andrew, for leading today's session. And thank you very much to our attendees for joining. We hope you found this information useful.